say that we need an organisational overhaul. Where is the best place to begin then in order to get it right?
Well, why we say this is because we've been tracking police resourcing and performance quite closely for a number of years now. And we noticed that from as far back as 2012, every year we've started to see declines in certain areas of performance. For example, fewer personnel being available to the police, drops in the ability to solve murders and robberies and violent crime. And this despite an increase in the budget. So that between 2012 and 2020, despite a 65% increase in the South African Police Service budget, we saw big reductions, 30% reduction in the ability to solve murder, actually more than 30%, and around a 24% reduction in the ability to solve armed robberies are just two examples of where we've seen organizational performance heading in the wrong direction. And that means that the problem facing the South African Police Service isn't just one of resources. It really needs to rethink what its key vision is, what capabilities does it need. And of course, we need to see an organization that we don't read about in the media all the time because very top leaders are making allegations against each other or being arrested or for corruption. We need to see our police leadership being a coherent group of highly trained men and women, professionals with unapproachable integrity in order to turn this huge organization around. So that's where one would need to start according to the National Development Plan.
And we'll go back to that in a moment, but I want to continue with the thought around resources, right? We've seen, especially in the last, shall we say, last year or so, whenever there's a serious crime that's reported on, widely reported on in the news, the police minister and the police commissioner head to that area. Recently, just this week, they were in Soweto where we saw this repeated gesture, the handover of police vehicles, a handful of these police vehicles being handed over. But you say in your piece that even though we're told about 10,000 new police officers are going to be trained now, post the COVID-19 lockdowns, many of those officers go into police stations that simply don't have the resources to allow them to fight crime properly, including vehicles.
Well, it's true that if you look at the crime problem, the police could do with more resources. But before we go there, we need to make sure that the existing resources are being effectively utilized. And that means not just resourcing. It means that you have the capability within the organization to do very detailed crime analysis in high crime areas with the objective of identifying the specific or likely perpetrators, the people who are actually committing the crimes, that are networked, that are dealing in goods stolen in robberies, for example, that are moving stolen or illegal firearms, and then direct the resources that you have in a very strategic manner to the specific locations, individuals and networks that are causing the problem. The police don't need to be everywhere. They need to be able to identify those that are committing the crime because a vast majority of our serious crime, murders, robberies, and corruption, but mostly the violent crime, is committed by a relatively small number of people and networks. And I think the main problem at the moment now is that the police, if you listen to their community in blue initiatives and that, have this idea that you must be visible and try and be everywhere. That's not possible here, and that's not possible anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. You don't need to police all 60 million people in the country. You need to police a few 10,000 or so that are committing a vast majority of the most serious crimes to start off with before you move into the less serious crimes. And I think that's where we have.
Visibility, correct me if I'm wrong, Gareth, is not necessarily effective policing.
Yes, there's been, decades, almost 67 decades of research on what makes policing effective. And random patrols, just having visible police driving around, being visible, has absolutely no impact on crime. It's what the police do that matters, not just seeing that they're there. So it is critically important that the police are able to, as I say, utilize the available resources in a much more effective manner so that if you do increase resourcing and budgeting, that you can see a commensurate improvement in the performance and in public safety. And as I say earlier, we haven't seen that despite very big increases in the police budget.
Why haven't we seen the implementation, or at least the full implementation of the solutions contained in the National Development Plan for policing specifically?
Well, as far back as 2012, the National Development Plan identifies the serial crisis of top management in the police as one of the key factors that is undermining the ability of the organization to be highly effective. This is not surprising because we had about 6 or so different people in the position of national commissioner from the moment that Jackie Selebi was suspended and convicted until around 2017 when the former National Commissioner, Gareth Newham, was appointed. And so if you have this, which means that we had somebody different almost on average every 2 years in that post. And of course, every new National Commissioner, whether they're in a permanent or acting position, restructures the top management echelon, brings in loyalists, moves people around, which is highly destabilizing. In order to really get the best out of a large organization like the South African Police Service that has close to 180,000 personnel working from 1,158 police stations covering the entire landmass of South Africa, you need to have very stable, consistent leadership that is able to really make sure that the policies, the recommendations, and the systems for providing the necessary training, support, resources, and importantly, accountability to those that are not doing the work or involved in criminality and corruption are properly maintained and constantly improving. But when those people who are at the top of the organization are at war with each other, do not see eye to eye, are mistrustful of each other because of levels of corruption affecting the highest levels of the police, then those systems start to deteriorate, and you can't provide that kind of support and resourcing and accountability to your station-based members who are facing the real difficulties of actually confronting crime head-on. So it really needs to start, as the National Development Plan says, with the recommendations around rejuvenating that top echelon, which has many excellent men and women. We've got brilliant generals from all backgrounds and brigadiers, but there's been too much political interference, too many appointments made for political reasons, and that dilutes that top management capability to work as a coherent whole and achieve the kinds of organizational improvements that are required.
And the country has been shocked and outraged in recent weeks, and rightly so, by first the deaths of those 21 young people at a Enyobeni tavern in East London. As things stand, we still don't have the toxicology results, which we're expecting will help us understand why they died and why only the young people died on that night at Enyobeni, right? On Sunday, we woke up to the news that 16 people we know were shot dead at another tavern in Soweto. There as well, we don't know who attacked them or why. Is that sort of thing, that sort of the lack of clarity, do you think, and accountability in the immediate term after such bizarre incidents, is that more common than we realize in terms of information coming forward from the police and cracking the cases?
Well, I think both incidents show two key things. The one is the first incident around the tavern where the youngsters died. It just shows that the conditions that lead to serious negative social outcomes are not always in the police hands. And the second one about being able to shoot up taverns without the police being able to know this is happening and quickly make arrests talks about two things there as well. Both one is intelligence capability, the ability for the police to use their intelligence capability to know who the most likely suspects are because they've got a good sense of who's dealing in AK-47s in particular parts of the country and who might be likely to have access to these kinds of weapons, firstly. And secondly, we're suffering a huge deficit of public trust and legitimacy in the South African Police Service. A recent HSRC, Human Science Research Council, South African Social Attitude survey showed that last year, the levels of trust in South Africa, in the police in South Africa, the lowest it's been in democracy. Only 27% of adults who were surveyed said they had any level of trust in the South African Police Service, which means that a vast majority of people do not trust the police, so that even if they have information, they're unlikely to bring that to the police because they don't believe the police will act on it, or they think their lives might be in danger because the police will leak it to the suspects. So there needs to be, when I talk about organizational renewal, big focus on achieving improvements in intelligence. We need to have a stable leadership in intelligence and a very clear plan of action about how to remove those elements in intelligence who are not doing their work or working with crime syndicates and replace them with dedicated men and women who are highly trained and have resources to provide the intelligence services. And then secondly, overall, we've got to reduce high levels of corruption and brutality in the police. And every police official needs to understand that every engagement they have with a civilian, whether that person's a victim of crime, opening a complaint, or is a crime suspect, they need to treat that person with respect, dignity, and communicate in a way that explains exactly what they needed so that that trust starts to be rebuilt.
Gareth Newham, always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much for speaking to us about the state of policing in South Africa.